So yesterday I talked about how I was feeling like crap because I forgot to take my stimulant medication for my for ADHD. So I take 26.1 milligrams of my days. So I made sure to take it this morning. Made me feel a little nauseous, and I was still kind of upset and moody. I don't know if that was because of that 1 day break on the medication or not, but as you may or may not know, I have cerebral palsy, major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and ADHD. And in my channel, basically, you'll find videos about like all the different medications that I have tried and have failed to really help me with my conditions. And I live with a bunch of people. I live with my parents, my son, he's 10. And then, like, we have a back house. So in the back house, we have my sister, my nephew, my baby niece, who's about 2 months old. My nephew is also 10 years old. He's the same age as my son, but he's a couple months younger. So it's my sister, my nephew, my baby niece, and my brother-in-law. And then in the back house, and it's my parents and myself and my son here in the main house. So it's a total of 7 of us. And yeah, and then my brother-in-law, my brother visits often with my sister-in-law and her and their kids and my nieces and stuff. And yeah, it can get pretty chaotic. And one of the things about the Latino or Mexican culture, because my parents are immigrants and I'm also an immigrant, they brought me to the United States when I was about to turn 3 years old, or maybe I was already 3, around there. But the point is, inside of this house is very Mexican with like old kind of, older traditions and values and stuff. Mental health is very much stigmatized, although I think my dad's gotten better about understanding when I need to go get certain treatments, because I am undergoing TMS, or transcranial magnetic stimulation therapy, for depression and anxiety. And I just recently started that. I've only had 4 days of treatment, and the treatment protocol, I think, is a total of 38 days. And my parents are the ones who drive me there, because I don't drive. I have a car, but they basically use it to drive me around. So he'll drive me to the treatment center and back. And in the past, whenever I was like going to therapy and stuff, he would be very negative about it. He would say things like, "Why do you need to go to therapy? I could talk to you and you could pay me to tell you whatever that quack is telling you." He grew up in a culture that's very machista, right? There's a lot of machismo in the Mexican culture. And so they don't show emotions. The only emotion that I've really ever seen him show is anger, right? Anger, and then just his neutral state. But he shows a lot of anger. It's pretty explosive. He doesn't know how to talk about like feelings and things. And my mom is very, very passive. And again, that's part of the culture, unfortunately, right? Wife just kind of submits to the husband and doesn't say much. And so I grew up in that environment, and it was toxic, and it still is, to say the least, because I'm still living here with them. But I love them very much. I understand that they're really only doing what they know because that's how they were raised. So they didn't know any better back when I was younger, and to an extent they still don't know, although it's gotten better. Like I said, my mom recently started on antidepressants and like medication for her ADHD, and I also found a therapist for her to talk to, which she's going to start next week. So I think the mom that she was 20 years from now when I was younger would have never agreed to any of those things. And why am I talking about this is because this is a mood journal, and I talk about what I did, who I saw, and how I felt, and how my mood is. My mood right now is crap. Like, I just cried because I got into a huge argument with my sister because, like I said, we live together, even though they live in the back house now. And my 10-year-old nephew and my son, who's also 10, they are polar opposites. My nephew is very extroverted, very out there. He likes to be like in your face, always. I don't know. They're just complete opposites, right? My son is very introverted. He loves his space. He's not a big fan of like surprises. He doesn't like to be taken out of his routine. He's not a big fan of loud noises. He's a lot like me. And my sister and I, we could say we are polar opposites as well. Um, and I think that I used to be a lot more of a doormat than in some ways I feel like I still am a doormat. Like I would do a lot for my family because we come from a collectivist culture. Whereas in the US, it's an individualist culture, right? Where the individual is valued above the group. In Mexico and places in Asia and other places, they are collectivists. So the group or the family is valued above the individual, and you do what you have to do to protect and to help your family. And that's part of what makes it toxic, because there were a lot of secrets and things that were swept under the rug, a lot of trauma that really affected me growing up. And it goes back many generations. It was the same way with my mom and the same way with my grandma. You kind of sweep things under the rug to make the family look good, protect the family at all costs. And so it can be a very toxic and codependent type of enmeshed kind of relationship that we have with our family. And so, like, to give you an example, my parents drive me. I pay like about 1,500 in rent. My parents drive me places, so without them, I don't know if I'd be able to get places. I could take Uber everywhere, but that would eventually run my pockets dry anyway. I don't think I could afford to take Uber everywhere that I need to go on a daily basis. My parents also do most of the cooking because, again, it's a lot of us here, and there's only one kitchen. And to be honest, growing up, I was never really allowed to cook or to touch knives or to get in the kitchen. And to this day, I feel like I'm not really a good cook. So they do the cooking. They also take me to work and back and take me to my appointments that I need to go to. And I help them out by paying rent. And they also own like a party decorating business. I print things for them because they also make like wood cutouts of different like characters that they use in their decorations. I print things for them. I go on the computer, do my graphic design stuff. I cut vinyl for them. I There's just like different things, right, that we kind of do for each other that in a way we're so entangled that I don't know if any of us could really survive on our own at this point without the other. Like, my dad's the same way. Like, he's very old fashioned. He doesn't know how to use an ATM machine. Um, or he wouldn't know how to, like, pay his own bills online. My mom has all that information. He always, like, if he's going to go out and buy something, he has to have cash because he doesn't, like, own a credit card or a bank card, and he wouldn't know how to use it. And he's been really stubborn about not wanting to learn how to use all that. Although, ironically, he does know how to use the phone now to text mom and to kind of go on Facebook and watch YouTube and all that. He's a quick learner, but sometimes he's really stubborn and stuck in his ways. So I, in turn, for like my parents kind of driving me places and doing all these things for me. In the past, I would stay home, and my sister and my parents and everybody would go out and do their decorations. This was before I had a full-time job. I didn't have a full-time job at the time. I had an Etsy shop, and I made like pennies on the dollar, not very much, like $300, $400 a month, which was barely enough to cover like my phone bill, and then I would give my parents the rest. And again, it wasn't even stable income because it's Etsy, right? And it's rare for someone to have like a small business like that and have like a stable income. So in the past, years ago, they would go out and decorate, and they would leave me at home with my son and my nephew to babysit the both of them. And like, obviously I have to watch my son when I'm here, right? He's my son. But I never agreed to watch my nephew while I stayed home, and that was difficult for me because on top of running my shop, I was in school. I've been in college for a very long time. I'm in graduate school now, going into my second year of graduate school for speech and language pathology. And at times I would feel like I just couldn't catch a break. They would leave the kids with me on the weekends, and that's the time that I wanted to just use to recuperate and catch up on homework and assignments and like also Etsy orders. And at times I felt like I couldn't because I had to watch the kids and they fight a lot. They don't always get along. And one day, a couple years ago, I decided to say, you know what, I can't watch him this weekend. I have to catch up on homework. I'm really behind. And my sister just blew a fuse. She was so upset. She in front of me, she told my mom to tell her that she needs to watch him because she doesn't even pay, like she hardly pays you anything in rent. And this is how we make our living, and this is the reason why she's like, she has a roof over her head and she has food. So tell her she doesn't have a choice. And they tried, she tried to get my parents to say, you have to watch your nephew, you don't have a choice. But it turned into a huge argument. We didn't talk for a while, but yeah, in the end, they agreed, okay, well, we can't make you watch him. And ever since then, they kind of ask me before they just leave my nephew or my niece with me. They ask me if it's okay or if I can watch him. But yeah, that was like a huge thing, and it was a very emotional time, and it was really hard to deal with. Recently, a couple months ago, my son and my nephew, like I said, they're always butting heads, kind of like my sister and I were, because they're opposites. And my son a couple months ago told me that my nephew had been saying mean things to him at school because they go to the same school. That he would say something like, I'm going to break your glasses, or I'm going to sit on your Pop-Tart, or whatever, dumb things like that. Kids fighting. And I was like, okay, I tried to talk to my nephew about it. I talked to my son about it. I talked to my sister about it, like, look, this is what my son is telling me, blah, blah, blah. And then my sister's like, yeah, well, Mason says a lot of mean things to him all the time, and blah, blah, blah. Like, we really never get anywhere. It's always like a constant, like, she's always on the defense. And maybe I'm always on the defense too. I don't know. But it seems like we really just can't communicate because we were never taught what a healthy communication looked like. And then recently, a couple months ago, it got to the point, I guess their argument got really bad. I don't know what my son and my nephew were arguing about. But my nephew said something along the lines of, at least my dad lives with me. Right? And of course, that hurt my son immensely, right? Because there's one thing for kids to be talking about, like, oh, you're fat, you're a 4 eyes, you're ugly, which is still not nice. I try to teach them not to be mean to each other and to get along. But then you cross the line where you're at a whole other level, where now you're insulting the kid's parents. And now, by him saying something like, at least my dad lives with me, like that. So that was really personal. And I was upset. And my son told his dad, who doesn't live with me, but we co-parent. And he was upset, and understandably so. So he came inside the house, and we co-parent to the point where he would come in and fix things around the house if he needed to. My parents relied on him a lot when it comes to, because he was a mechanic in the military. My parents relied on him a lot when it came to like fixing their car if something went wrong, or even like needing things to be fixed around the house, or building new cabinets or anything, because he was also into carpentry. His dad and I, we've known each other for over 17 years, and my parents grew really close to him and came to think of him as a son. And he, in turn, kind of came to think of my parents as his parents because he never met his dad, and his mom passed away. So it was a really close bond that they had, even though he and I weren't together. And it took us a while to get to the point where we were amicable after our separation, because there was infidelity and all of these things involved. But anyway, back to the story. When my son's dad heard my son say that my nephew had said that to him, he came home and he went up to my sister, and my sister was like 8.5 months pregnant with my niece at this point. And the thing with my sister, she doesn't talk things out either. She's always been kind of spoiled. And I think it's hard when people confront her with things that she feels like she tends to explode, right? She gets explosive because she doesn't know how to talk things out. So my son's dad went up to her and said, I need you to tell your son not to say stuff like that to my son. Arguably, that could have gotten better. The conversation could have started differently. But my sister was upset and said, get away from me. And he said, no, I'm just telling you. And then my sister just didn't want to hear it. She said, don't tell me nothing. Don't talk to me. I'm pregnant. I don't want to talk to anyone. And then my son's dad said, well, I need you to listen because this problem has been happening for a while. And he said, and my sister said, I don't want to talk about it. So again, my sister, it's like a wall, right? She also doesn't really communicate. She doesn't really communicate when there's a problem. She doesn't talk things out. It's all explosive and reactive. There is no sitting down and talking about things. And my sister called my dad and said, Dad, look at him. He's being, he's being aggressive, even though I didn't feel like he was being aggressive. I felt like he was upset, but I felt like it was understandable because that's that mama bear, like, reaction that I have sometimes too when someone's saying something hurtful or doing something hurtful to my son. It's just natural, I think, to want to stand up for our children. So my sister yelled. My dad came running downstairs, did not bother asking what happened, did not bother asking what was going on. He just told my son's dad to get out. It's like, get out of here. You need to leave. Like, I don't want to see you again. And of course, that was really hurtful to him. That was hurtful to me. My son was even there. It was like this whole drama thing that blew up. And ever since, this was a couple months ago, he hasn't been coming in the house, which, like, it's fine, right? We're separated. But of course, my son feels that because he's used to his dad just being comfortable walking in the house and, like, hanging out here. And a lot of it is because of pride, which I understand why he got upset. But he's also very prideful. But I think this came about because my nephew was saying some really mean things to my son. And as adults, we all want to protect our kids, and instead of talking to the kids, we talk to each other and couldn't communicate, and it just made a big mess. And my dad, of course, is explosive as ever. So this was a couple months ago, and ever since, my sister and I, too, we didn't talk for a while. We just recently started talking again after my niece was born. She's 2 months old. And then today, so now we get to this point of the story. Again, my nephew was eating in the kitchen. He has his own kitchen. They have their own kitchen and bathroom in the back house, but he just likes to hang out here, I think, because it feels familiar to him. And I don't know, maybe he gets lonely back there. The point is he comes to the front house and hangs out. And they were eating in the kitchen. And when this happened a couple months ago, before that we had gotten into another argument where I got upset and Mason's dad got upset. My son's dad got upset because my son's dad bought him a bag of chips, and my son left the chips somewhere in the kitchen, and by the time he wanted to get them, my nephew had already eaten them. And so my son's dad called my sister and said, look, those were his chips. I need you to buy him another bag of chips. She got really upset. She and my brother-in-law got really upset over that because, like I said, everything is enmeshed. But at the same time, I feel like it's, I don't know, there are no boundaries, right? And that's what causes the problem. It's they don't say, oh, whose chips are these? Can I have some? They just kind of take things. So my sister got upset, bought him a bag of chips, threw the chips at me, and said, good luck finding your son a ride to work. Because she would give my son a ride to work. Because I work at 2 different school sites, and one of those school sites is almost an hour away. So when I had to work at that site that was an hour away, 45 minutes away, three days a week, she would have to give my son a ride because my son and my nephew, they go to the same school. So she's already going over there anyway. So she would give my son a ride. My parents would give me a ride to the other school site where I had to work at. And when she said that, she threw me the bag of chips and she said, good luck finding your son a ride to work from now on. And my son was there, and so he heard that. And so that was hurtful to me because Like the fact that I don't drive, it's not so much because of my cerebral palsy. I think a lot of it just has to do with my lack of confidence and anxiety. And that's something that I hope to overcome, but I'm already 34 and I still don't drive. I have a Tesla and it can self-drive me to certain places, but I've never tried using the self-drive feature by myself because I just feel like I'm not ready. Anyway, that was one of those lines that I feel that she didn't have to cross, right? Like, yes, like my son was upset because my nephew had eaten his chips and like he shouldn't have. And like all this other stuff. My son is very protective of all his things and sometimes he doesn't like to share things, which is something that I'm working with him on. But how do you go from arguing about the fact that my nephew ate a bag of chips and then you turn it up a notch like 1,000 and then she goes and jumps to the whole, well, I good luck finding your son a ride. And to me that felt really personal and unnecessary. I was like, you crossed the line. I'm the one paying for the internet and my nephew is online all day long playing his games. So the second she said that, I was like, all right, well then you need to pay for your own internet because I'm not going to be paying for him to be playing on the Wi-Fi that I'm paying for. So I blocked her phone and all of his devices from the internet. And she got really upset at that. So it was like just this back and forth thing constantly. But you did this, or I'm going to do this. I don't know. So then that happened. And we didn't talk for a while. And then my niece was born. I went into the house. I wanted to see my niece, obviously. And then we just kind of swept that under the rug. We didn't apologize. We didn't like talk it out or anything. But there's like a line there. Like it didn't feel like we were as close as we were before. But we were amicable. And today when my nephew and my son were arguing again, my son was like, well, how are you playing games? Like, who gave you the Wi-Fi password? Because you're not supposed to be using it. And I heard that, and immediately I said, you know what, Mason, don't worry about it. Like, just don't even worry about it. It's not even worth arguing about. My nephew said, well, he said something like, oh, I'm using my mom's hotspot or something like that. And then my son looked at me and said, well, I think he's using your Wi-Fi. And, when other people use the Wi-Fi, the internet gets slower. And I was like, I know, it's okay, but I need you to let it go. Because I, felt that this was going to turn into another thing that was just going to blow up, right? And there's always this tension that sometimes I just want to keep the peace. And it's so hard. And then I said, yeah, it makes the internet slower, but that's fine. Don't worry about it. My son said, do you have to pay more for the internet if there's more people using it? And I'm like, no, you don't. And my nephew said something along the lines of, like, man, do you only have one brain cell or something like that? And I said, all right, you need to stop. And my son, kind of shot back and said, well, at least I have a brain. And then my nephew, of course, brought up the whole thing about my son's dad again and responded with, at least my dad lives with me. Again, twice in a span of a couple of months, knowing how much that made the whole family dynamic blow up and knowing how much problems that comment caused the first time, he decided to use it again. And I got so upset. And I yelled at him. I said, that better be the last time that I hear you say that. And I realized that I was yelling at him and I was like, all right, you need to come back here with me. We're going to go see your parents. He was in the front house at this point. I took him to the back house. My sister and my brother-in-law were there, and I said, look, he and Mason were arguing again, and he said, at least my dad lives with me. And I was like, and I need you to tell him that's not okay because it's the second time he says that. I wasn't there the first time, but I was there this time, and that really upset me. And my brother-in-law said, did you yell at him because he's crying? I said, yes, I yelled at him. It's like, well, you're an adult. You shouldn't be yelling at kids. I was like, well, then do something about it. Because clearly this is a problem that just keeps popping up. And he yelled at me. My sister got upset. And it was this whole thing again. And then later, a couple hours later, my son's dad came by to pick up my son to take him to his house for a little bit. And my son told him what my nephew had said again. And he looked at me and he said, I told you not to let him talk to Lucito anymore, which is my nephew's name. And I was like, well, I can't just tell him not to talk to him because we all live together. It's very difficult for me to just say, you know what, don't be around them. And they're cousins, and I know that don't always get along, but they look for each other when they're lonely. They really do. And he said, well, if you had just kept them away from each other, none of this would have happened. And I just started crying because I feel like I'm trying so hard to keep the peace, and I just can't. And sometimes I feel like a failure of a mom because I'm stuck in this impossible situation. Like, I can't go out and live on my own because I don't drive. I have a decent income, but it wouldn't be enough still for me to live on my own and be able to afford groceries and bills and all of this because I'm in Southern California and the cost of living here is ridiculous. And I feel like I'm in the same toxic environment where I grew up, and that caused me all this trauma growing up. And it's like, I don't want my son to go through the same thing. And so I cried. So today I felt like crap again because of this toxic family dynamic that we have going on. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's like I'm just gonna keep re-traumatizing myself, and my son's gonna deal with the same problems that I had to deal with growing up with my parents because they live here with us. So it feels like a cycle that I have to break out of. Again, I love my family. I love my parents. That doesn't mean that this dynamic, this family system, isn't toxic, because it is. It's unhealthy on so many levels. And sometimes I feel like I just don't know how to break out of it. Um, yeah, that's my mood journal for today. I should be getting things ready for work because I start back up at work tomorrow after being off for the summer, so that's definitely causing some anxiety. But instead, I'm dealing with this, so I guess I will be back tomorrow.